Hi friends, I'm Coley, this is Sweet Peaches Nutrition, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make quinoa salad. We're going to do 3 different variations, so let's get into it. So, to me, the beginnings of any good bowl, especially if you're going to be talking about a grain bowl, is a good whole grain. And today we're going to be focusing on quinoa. I feel like quinoa got its 5 minutes of fame maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was all the rage. So you've probably heard of it. If not, it is technically a pseudo grain, but it's in the culinary world considered a whole grain. So it has lots of fiber and good carbohydrates, and quinoa is really cool because it is a complete protein, meaning that it has all the amino acids your body needs. Just a quick myth-busting moment. You don't need to eat every amino acid together in one meal. You don't always need a complete protein in every meal. Your body is smart enough to collect all of the protein building blocks it needs from many meals. So this whole protein combining thing used to be a fad, but I think people have gotten away from that. So if you've heard stuff about complete and incomplete proteins before, it's not something you really need to worry about. But quinoa's got you covered. Also, it can be a great way to up your protein content of your meal if you're a vegetarian or if you're worried about your protein intake. Again, most Americans are getting plenty of protein, but if you do eat a vegetarian or a vegan diet, it is something you need to think a little more about than your average person. Also, we love quinoa because it's gluten-free, not a gluten-containing grain, so it can be enjoyed by those with celiac or gluten sensitivities. I also really like quinoa because it has an overall neutral flavor. I'd say it's pretty on par with rice, so it's great to substitute into dishes where you might be using rice and you just want to mix it up or try something new, or like I said, add a little bit more protein. So quinoa, like other whole grains, is really easy to cook. So let's break down how you want to cook grains, and specifically quinoa. So the first step is to rinse your grain. So whether you're using rice, quinoa, or something else, you want to give it a good rinse. So what I like to do is put it in a bowl with some water, give it a little slosh, and then drain off most of the water and repeat a couple times. So you do this for rice because you can get the excess starch off of the outside of the rice. And for quinoa, it can have a bit of a bitter taste because of some of the phytochemicals that the plant makes, and so by rinsing it you can remove some of that bitter taste and just get delicious quinoa. So step 1, rinse, and then the second step is to add it to a pot with water. Now the ratio of water to grain depends on what the grain is. Depending on how thick and fibrous it is, white rice will need less water and less cooking time than brown rice that still has the husk, and a really hard grain will probably need more water and a longer cooking time than a softer grain. So there are plenty of charts and information, and a quick Google search will get you to the right water to grain ratio for whatever you're cooking. For quinoa, it's a simple 2-to-1 ratio, so 2 parts water to 1 part quinoa. Typically I'll make a cup of quinoa so that I have some leftover, or make a big batch of whatever I'm cooking, so 1 cup of quinoa to 2 cups of water. So for grains, you want to add the water and the grain to the pot and bring it to a boil together. And then once it's boiling, you're going to want to cover it with a tight-fitting lid, turn down the heat to a simmer, and let it cook until the water is absorbed. So unlike pasta, where you have boiling water, add in your pasta, and then scoop it back out, the grains absorb the water that they're cooked in. So that's why you want to check out the correct ratio so that you add the right amount of water, and then you want to cook it for long enough so that it absorbs and the grain is no longer hard and crunchy. So of course there's always a little bit of wiggle room with this, and that's why it's always a good idea to taste your food as you go. If you've cooked your quinoa for the right amount of time and it still tastes a little hard, add a little more water, cook it for a little longer. If it tastes good and the water's gone, even though your timer still has 3 minutes left, pull it from the heat, you're probably good, right? That's the trick of learning to cook, is learning to taste as you go and trust yourself and not say, well, the recipe says 15 minutes, so I have to leave it on for 15 minutes. There are very few things that are that precise in cooking, and a lot of it you just gotta learn to go with your gut and go with your experience, and if you've done this before, trust yourself. So let's get into the 3 recipes that we're going to make. We're going to make a Greek quinoa salad, a Tex-Mex quinoa salad, and a spring roll quinoa salad. So let's head to the kitchen and check them out.
Okay, so to rinse the grains, I'm adding my dry quinoa to a bowl, and then I'm just going to pour some water over top and give it a little stir so that all the grains get wet. And then, like I mentioned, just drain off the water and rinse and repeat until you have your rinsed quinoa. And then once it's drained off mostly, you're going to add it to a pot. So I'm adding my rinsed quinoa to a pot along with some water. Remember, quinoa has a 2-to-1 ratio of water to quinoa. And then we're just going to take it over to the stove and bring it to a boil, then reduce to a simmer for about 15 minutes until our quinoa is fully cooked. Give it a taste to make sure it's soft, and then give it a good fluff. For our first flavor of salad, for the Greek quinoa salad, you're going to need a cucumber, red onion, black olives, pimentos, sliced almonds, and a couple sprigs of mint. And to top it off for some extra flavor, we're going to use a balsamic glaze. Okay, so first we're going to prep the cucumber. First I'm going to cut it in half because it's harder to cut something that's longer than the length of your knife. So just to make it easier, we're going to cut it in half and then cut off the ends. And then I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise. You can scoop out the seeds if you want, but there shouldn't be a problem in this type of dish. And then I'm going to cut them into little planks, depending on the size of your cucumber, and then I'm going to dice them so that they're in small pieces, because you want the salad to mix together nicely so that you get one bite full of a lot of different types of flavors. And so depending on how much quinoa you make and how much you like each ingredient, you can kind of decide on the amounts of each ingredient to your taste. It's not really a precise thing, it's whatever you like. And then next up is our red onion. So if you have never cut an onion before, you want to leave that root side intact. So first we're going to slice it in half, and oh my gosh, red onions are just so pretty. So I'm going to leave the root side down, but I'm going to cut off the stem side so that I can easily peel off the papery layer. So you peel off the papery layers, the part that you wouldn't really want to eat because it wouldn't have the best texture, and remove those, and you can save your scraps for vegetable broth if you'd like. And then I want these to be really small because I'm not a huge raw onion fan, so I'm making very thin slices, and then I'm going to mince my onion from there. And I'm not cutting the whole thing because I know I'm not going to use the whole thing for this recipe. If you want to go ahead and cut up the whole thing, you can totally do that too, but I'm going to save that rest of the piece for something else that I'll make later on in the week. So then I'm just slicing through to make small little pieces because I don't want to get a giant bite of onion. But again, if that's your thing, go for it. And now it's time to assemble our Greek quinoa salad. So we're taking our cooled quinoa and adding to it cucumbers, red onions, diced pimentos, diced olives, and then we've got our sliced almonds. Again, you can chop them finer if you don't want as much of a crunch. And finally, we're going to top it off with some fresh chopped mint. It'll give it a really nice finish. And then it's as simple as mixing it all up. So, like I said, you can totally adjust the ratios of the different ingredients depending on your taste or what you have on hand. And once you got everything nice and incorporated, it's time to add our balsamic glaze on top. It'll just give it a really nice finish and some extra flavor. And if you want to, you could also add in some feta cheese. That would be really good in this as well. Next up is our Tex-Mex quinoa salad. So we're going to use some cherry tomatoes that are cut in half, some diced bell pepper, some pickled jalapenos for a little bit of heat and flavor, pumpkin seeds for some fat and a crunch, and then some corn. And we'll top it off with some fresh cilantro. A quick tip about storing your herbs: if you buy a bunch of like fresh cilantro or fresh parsley, chop off the ends and stick it in a jar with some water and store it like flowers. It'll last so much longer. This is like 3 weeks old. I can't believe it. And now this stuff will look pretty familiar. So to our cooled cooked quinoa, we're going to add our halved cherry tomatoes, some diced red bell peppers or whatever pepper you prefer, some drained canned corn. You can also use fresh corn, or if you want to add a little extra flavor, you can use grilled corn. Then I'm adding pickled jalapenos. Again, you can add fresh jalapenos for more heat, or skip this if you're a spice wimp like me. And then we're going to add in some pumpkin seeds. And finally, we will top it with some fresh cilantro. Then stir to combine all that goodness, and we're going to add some onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, and cumin to flavor our quinoa and give it a little more oomph. Now, you should probably plan ahead, unlike I did, and mix in your spices before you add in all your ingredients just to get it nice and well incorporated. But if you forget like me, this works too. And for our final spring roll salad, you're going to need green onions, matchstick carrots, edamame that's been shelled, sesame seeds, and some fresh cilantro again, as well as our cashew dressing. So you can cut your green onions at an angle. It's called on a bias, and that'll give it some fun dimension for a garnish. But you can also just cut them straight across if you don't want to take that extra step. But this can be kind of a fun trick to make your dish look a little fancier, and people will be impressed with your fancy garnishes. First, we're going to make our cashew dressing. So we're going to use 1/4 cup of cashew butter. If you don't have that or can't find it, you can definitely substitute in peanut butter. And then I'm going to add to it 3 tablespoons of water to thin it out. So just going to mix that up with a fork. It's a little tricky at first and it feels like it's not going to incorporate, but just keep giving it a good mix and eventually you'll get the water to incorporate with the nut butter and you'll get a thinner nut butter that can be used as a sauce. And so once you have that mostly incorporated, then we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. So we're going to add in some soy sauce. Soy sauce is really great to add to sauces because it's going to not only give it a salty taste, but also bring some of that umami, savory, protein flavor as well. So it's really nice to use in dressings. Going to go ahead and mix that in as well. And then we're going to add the rest of our seasoning. We're going to add onion powder, garlic powder, and ginger because those will give our sauce nice flavor. And in this case, it's just so much easier to use the ground version than fresh garlic and ginger. But if you're in the mood and you're feeling it, you could substitute that in as well. And then we're just going to give it one final mix and make sure you taste it and it's to your liking. You can always add more ginger if you really like that flavor. Or if you need to thin it out, you can add more water if it's too thick to pour over your quinoa salad. And once again, it is time to assemble our salad. So to our cooled cooked quinoa, I'm going to add shelled edamame, our matchstick carrots, which you can also just cut carrots that you have if you don't want to buy or cut matchsticks. Then we're going to add in some green onions. You can reserve some of your fancy cut ones to sprinkle on top. And then some sesame seeds. Finally, we're going to add our chopped cilantro. That'll give it a nice fresh finish. And then drizzle our cashew dressing on top. Finally, just give it a mix and you're ready to serve. Don't forget, again, to give it a taste, and if you need to add more dressing, or if you want to add more cilantro, whatever it may be, go with your taste buds. And that is how you make these 3 delicious quinoa salads. They keep great in the fridge, so you can definitely make a batch ahead of time to meal prep for the week. And also, I eat them cold or maybe at room temperature if you've packed them for lunch, so they're great for on the go.
So I hope that gives you ideas for lunch next week. Let me know what kind of grain bowl you'd like to make in the comments below. How would you invent your perfect grain bowl? What would be in it? I'd love to hear, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye!